Thanks. Compared to sessions yesterday, we got quite the intimate group. So if you have questions or thoughts, let's make this a dialogue and not just a rote presentation, because that would be a lot of fun. Get more out of it. So today's session is Customer Data Platform 101. So we won't be going into complex things, but we totally can if the conversation goes that route. So first thing that we'll go over is, so what exactly is a customer data platform? Commonly used acronym of CDP. And I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen for that. Okay, so what exactly is a customer data platform? So one quick hitter is that it's a solution to key business problems that we're able to understand and engage with learners with the response time talking in milliseconds. With these four key areas: one, it provides a single customer view. Two, insights across the various business units across ASU. Three, it enables cross-channel engagement with the user. And four, it integrates data silos. So I believe a lot of us are familiar with the really advanced implementations of the Salesforce CRM that we have at ASU. And even with that, there's still about a dozen different Salesforce CRMs around there. So when you think of a single view of an individual, right now, well, it really varies depending on which CRM you're in, or it really varies depending on the table that you're looking at. So having a single view of the critical components that we have on the individual is something easier said than done. Two, insights across business units. A lot of us focus on platforms, or maybe I'm the product owner of X, or I analyze this platform data. But really, that's not how users engage with ASU. Students and learners, our constituents, engage with us agnostic of which product owner or which department actually powers or builds these environments. So to be able to have insight on a user across the different products that we manage, once again, is the critical requirement. Three, also ASU invests heavily with email communications, with the great work that Enterprise Marketing Hub and UTO do to support Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And then we also work with agency partners that help us engage and interact with people, maybe on social platforms. But still, all this is disjointed and primarily list-based. Give me a list and I'll send an email. Give me a list and I'll go post something on Facebook. And also integrating data silos. A lot of us have awesome raw data, or we enrich data, but it sits in different environments, which could be for a valid purpose. But how can we make sure that all of those different systems are at least adding to a single view of an individual to where we can act on it? But still with this, the concept of a CDP, it's EdPlus has been building this enterprise solution for the past 3-4 years, but even still within EdPlus, sometimes it's difficult for people to understand the concept of a CDP or where a customer data platform sits within a technical organization. So sometimes it's helpful to first also say what a CDP is not. So what are some key differences or maybe some key similarities? So as far as what a CDP is not, it is not a customer relationship management platform like a CRM. ASU invests, and rightfully so, in Salesforce CRM. It's best in class. And so, but some key similarities are, both a CRM and its CDP both collect PII, both collect the identity of the individual. But maybe then a key difference, though, is that the CRM focuses on customer-facing interactions. When you call someone and you have a conversation, you jot your notes down. When you have an alert that says, hey, you might need to reach out to someone because they're failing their course, or they didn't pay their tuition, or whatever, those alerts go to a system for someone to respond to. And most often, a CRM is a very appropriate place to put that. A customer data platform, whereas it's focused on the interactions between the end user and our products or services. So how an end user is interacting with a web app, how the end user is interacting with a mobile app, how the end user is interacting with a smart TV, a smart device, etc. All those data points can feed into a CDP sure we have a holistic view of the individual's engagement with all of our systems. Okay, and then also a CDP is not a data management platform. Data management platform examples too, like really and historically really big ones are BlueKai and Crux. Oracle acquired BlueKai and Salesforce acquired Crux. But both of those, the main focus is on third-party data, while a customer data platform's focus is on our own first-party data. I sometimes, the most recent acquisition, Oracle BlueKai was maybe like 5 or 8 years ago. Salesforce's acquisition was more recently in the past few years at Crux. I'm curious to see how that acquisition paid off, just because how do we get this third-party data? It's really on buying data from third-party platforms. You know, when I use my Capital One card to swipe a transaction at Bass Pro Shop, then what exactly do I buy? What kind of categories am I doing? And then maybe Bass Pro Shop or Capital One would then sell my data to an aggregator. But then really that's just kind of household, because is my wife using my card? Is my brother using my card? So all this third-party attributes is probabilistic and not deterministic. And one time I looked at Oracle's, and it says I was a Hispanic baby boomer who drives a truck and has an Android phone. None of those are true, but I do wish that I do have a truck. So there's issues with the DMP, but I guess they have their place. But CDP focuses on understanding and aggregating first-party data into our own environment for our own use and business purpose. And then the third thing that it's not. A CDP is not an enterprise data warehouse. Now, they both use cloud technologies. They handle large volumes of data, high velocity data. In fact, the CDP here at ASU is actually built off of AWS. So it's highly scalable, just as much as anyone else who uses AWS. Some key differences, I would say that within an enterprise data warehouse that we articulate ourselves, we rely on a person-defined ETL workflows. So exactly what do we want to do with our data? But when you use a CDP as a service, it already comes defined with predefined schemas or backend technologies that helps us move and transform data as needed to enable a front-end solution. And then something that's really valuable as we are continuing to learn is the concept of the CDP that ASU has, is that it synchronizes the data that is from within the user interface of the customer data platform into distilled tables in data warehouse and into storage. There's a lot of effort to store and back up Salesforce data inside of UTO's data warehouse, which is a great thing to do. But it's also sometimes going to be a headache, because when we change the data schema, like on the Salesforce contact object, we have 3 new fields. How do we account for that and change it? I know there's at least it's been quite a bit of work to maintain and to monitor from within Ed+'s use case. But this provides it as a service to where whatever you configure on the front end immediately in the data environment of your CDP, you both have clean tables and data sets that reflect your most recent and historical configurations. All right, so although it's not any of those 3 things, but it works really well and is meant to work in hand with an enterprise data warehouse, with a customer relationship management platform. And so, with data warehousing, provide large-scale data science and data analysis initiatives, CRM maintaining enterprise scale user relationships, and then also what we're trying to do with understanding those individuals' engagements with our digital ecosystem. Let me just pull up chat too to see if we have questions. Again, for those that came on late, if you have questions or thoughts or comments, by all means, add them here. Okay, so here's an example of server-side data that we get at ASU. There are integrations to get Canvas data. If you have a Drupal database that you are migrating maybe to AWS, great. If you have websites built in Vue.js or those working with the edX or OpenEdX LMSs, great. Mobile app, awesome. You're on WordPress, they got you. And so all those create different datas tables within that environment. And if there is a join key between those two, if there's a user ID that we can map to, you can join data together. Client-side data, our CDP, and then the data layer as it aligns and is defined, kept consistent with the inputs for the Google Marketing Platform. Those environments, what we get from the client, also go into the GCP environment. Now with our CDP, it integrates both with our server data and with our client-side data. It's for the data we get from PeopleSoft, the data we get from Canvas Caliper or live events, what we get from our Drupal or Salesforce CRM environments. That still comes and gets joined with the data that we have from our client-side tracking. So here's an example of a pretty broad scope of engagement with our constituents here at ASU, all the way from general awareness of educational opportunities, all the way through retention, alumni engagement, etc. There are numerous technologies that go into maintaining these environments, but it's very difficult to have conversations with multiple groups for cross-department collaboration and data activation, because we work in different scenarios. We work with data platforms, and then we all talk to people using different technologies, and maybe one person wants to engage on social, another group wants to emphasize on email communications, another wants to do website personalization. How do we make sure that everyone's data is consistent and audiences are globally defined to where we're able to make sure that our messaging and engagement strategy is consistent? So the end user isn't seeing one message on LinkedIn, another one on our website, and a completely different thing on email. So here's a basic concept. So we collect data. So to your point, we have warehouses that collect, if not all, a lot of our data, but still, it's still not standardized. A key focus on a customer data platform is to start to standardize our data at the point of collection. So that way, what kind of data are we getting from Salesforce? What kind of data are we getting from an API? What data are we getting from the Google Marketing Platform, from Canvas LMS? Where there is like data, have them be enriched to a single to a consistent attribute of the user. So to say that we get their age from CRM, we get their age from PeopleSoft. Well, which data trumps? Like PeopleSoft would be the source of record for that, but if not available, then great, we'll use Salesforce. But either way, we can have the age of the user available to be used. Inside of the CDP, we transform and enrich that data. So we have numerous attributes that are able to be marked as on the user's record. Now here's a big delineation. Just whereas with a lot of the data going into an AWS environment, we store a lot of data. For the stuff coming from our client-side analytics with the Google Marketing Platform and into the Google Cloud Platform, we store a lot of data. Some of that could be as maybe to some trivial, but to maybe a UX designer critical of how far down a page is someone scrolling. And so to know that someone went down to 50% of the ASU.edu homepage isn't critical for audience segmentation, but maybe for UX analysis. So we reserve data that we put into the CDP to be data that is pertinent enough to put on a user record as an official attribute. So if the data is that important, then we transform and enrich that onto the user's official record. And then we integrate. A lot of the ASU is really great at analyzing data, at building data, at modeling data. It's sometimes difficult to then act on that data because it takes a lot of integration to do something with it. If we're doing email, then we're pretty good, like I'd say really good, because the integrations with Salesforce Marketing Cloud and the Salesforce CRM. But email isn't everything. We're not an email only organization, especially when we're trying to engage with disinterested or people who are distancing themselves and are trying to get a hold of them. If we already have a low click rate on our emails, what else do we have at our disposal to still engage with those users. And that's where a customer data platform by design is to then integrate natively with a lot of different technologies. Telium, the one that we'll keep talking about, that's here at ASU, natively integrates with over 1,300 different technologies. So if you want to have a cross-channel strategy of email plus Facebook, great. We can connect natively to where you don't have to manually upload lists. You can simply, when someone joins an audience, you can then be sent into Facebook and email at the same time. When they do what you're trying to have them do, and they're removed from the audience, then we in real time and automatically remove them from your email journey and from your social media campaign. So that way you don't have to manually upload lists or maintain those lists. It is, we don't work by lists, we work by audience definitions. And so to that point about data standardization, if you've been part of the Web Standards 2.0 initiative and are, then you might have heard a lot about the concept of a data layer. And so making sure that our data is consistent, agnostic of where the data is coming from. If it's coming from Salesforce, if it's coming from a Redshift table or a BigQuery table, or from the web client itself, to make sure that it's following our data layer standardization and data layer standards, then we're able to then enrich it to the user's profile and activate it in any application. So with this then, with the data being standardized, it doesn't matter if you're on a mobile, on a desktop device, on a tablet, we're able to then have cross-channel identity and engagement strategies. For example, one thing that we've worked with those who manage the Salesforce Marketing Cloud infrastructure is that when people click on a link in the email and it sends them to ASU, back to ASU, along with that URL, there's data passed on the URL that provides their Salesforce contact ID. So then if they start an application on a desktop device, but then they open up an email on a mobile device, Telium, our CDP, in real time stitches together that individual's behavior from both the desktop activity and the person's mobile activity all in one. For those that are familiar with the work, that goes on inside of a data warehouse, right now that would have to be through joining tables to then, and then you have to schedule that query or have some automatic process to constantly look for this data coming in to then automatically merge data from two different tables into a new record. This is a very simple concept, but incredibly complicated one to build. And it's one that a CDP provides as a service. So let's go into some use cases and what we're doing with it here. So in this use case, there's 150, on average, 150 daily ASU online leads, which start an application, but don't go far enough to choose a campus. So really, what does this mean? We have an audience that's defined by, we need to already have a person's record inside of the Ed Plus CRM to where they have their contact ID, and then that's an email address. Now, a workflow that already goes on is that once the ASU application knows that the individual is choosing the online modality, in real time, they'll send it back into the Ed Plus CRM to enrich their profile. Say, hey, the person who just requested info, oh, by the way, they also started or maybe completed an application. The challenge with that, though, is that the ASU application is a service for all modalities and for all campuses. And then to further complicate it, we don't ask for your campus or modality until page 5 of 6 pages. So you can create an account. Then you could look at, oh my gosh, I need to insert all of my transcripts, or oh my gosh, I have to insert all of the past educational institutions and the dates I was there, and kind of be like, you know what, I'm not ready to fill this out yet. I'm then going to go away, maybe come back, hopefully at a later time to fill this out. In that scenario, our CRM knows that days ago, or maybe just a few minutes ago, they submitted an RFI. We have an application system that knows someone's created an account, but that's all I know. Now, because the CDP or Telium is already integrated with the enterprise and Salesforce CRM, we know that this individual has submitted a request for information to an online course or online program. And the same individual then goes to apply to the university. And when you create an account, you provide your email address. So then automatically the join key there is on the email address. But then they stop out before they reach the point where you can choose a campus. And now we're able to now send that information back into our CRM, back into our email service provider, to where our communications are no longer, hey, go start your application, because it positions ASU poorly and makes it sound bad because they already did start their application. They just haven't finished it yet. And so in this context, the CDP is enabling multiple systems to be updated with the current status of an individual so we can act more appropriately. Here. So people who sign up for the Starbucks College Achievement Plan, the relationship that ASU has with Starbucks, it's where we get a list of all of their information upon hire and we communicate to them. And so this could be likewise for those that are on ground. You purchase this from the SAT or ACT tests, but we don't know a lot about them. Well, we invite them to go and learn about more additional information. And based upon their engagement within the web environment, we're able then to update their attributes back into our communication strategy. So we know if they are cost conscious, if they are time sensitive or whatnot, to where our communication and engagement isn't a one size fits all. We can insert dynamic content to where we don't have to have dozens of different email communication journeys. It can still just be one, but one journey that dynamically inserts content based upon which persona they align to. Here with this scenario, so knowing when people and students actually officially drop their course, this is a critical thing that a lot of systems are updated with, because there are financial ramifications if people drop a course and maybe they have to pay back tuition that FAFSA funds actually paid for. So there's a lot of existing great initiatives that tell people to reach out after someone who has dropped a course. And that data resides in PeopleSoft. So we know when that transaction has actually occurred, when they have officially dropped. But what can we do to get ahead of that and to see if students need support before they actually complete that transaction? A lot of students don't know the kind of investment that ASU makes in tutoring, in support, in counseling, and financial assistance. To where if they knew that they could get a math tutor for free, that then maybe they would stay and try to work out their course. We're trying to address those scenarios. And so with the integration, working with the great teams at UTO to have this level of integration with the PeopleSoft client, we're able to then understand when an individual just initiates that process, when they initiate the drop cycle, but then abandon it. So with that, to avoid noise, because the academic centers or success centers and academic advisors or our success coaches, they have a lot on their plate already. They don't have time to look at every piece of data to respond to people's needs. So we further refined this audience a little bit more towards not just when people initiate the drop process, because if they initiate it and they actually complete the drop process in 30 minutes, on the website, then they're going to be notified the next day anyways. So yeah, we can get the data to them much quicker, but at least they'll be notified the next day. And also too, people might drop a course, but then they're just going to then add another one to where they're rearranging their course load. And that's fine. Me in my undergrad and graduate history, I did that too. So we want to reserve this risky behavior and people and academic and success coaches to really recognize it and act upon it. So we want to reduce the amount of noise or false positives that we're giving them. So it's where they initiate the process to drop, but they do not officially drop, which we're also tracking from client side. But then they also don't click anywhere else in PeopleSoft to go view additional classes or to add a class or add a class block, to where the only thing they are doing within that web session is starting the process to drop and they abandon it. In that scenario, we want to make sure that ASU is able to rally behind the student, make sure that they're aware of the support, not to try to make them not drop if it's truly the thing they need to do. But if they're dropping because it's something that we can help with, resource that we can provide, we want to make sure that the student's aware of it.
Hey, Jonathan?
Yeah.
So the fact that student Mike dropped a course and didn't look into another course, that fact, is Telium the source of record for that fact?
Good question. Like, no, like as far as course registration, PeopleSoft is a system of record. It's just PeopleSoft only records completed transactions. So then if you're, but as far as knowing if someone starts but abandons, PeopleSoft doesn't know it.
Right. So that's only known, you get in Telium, the logic to define somebody did this, but then didn't do that, right? There's sort of a series of events.
Mm-hmm.
That's now a fact, and a very valuable fact. So now Telium is the system of record of that, because it got the source data from other places, but it applied logic so that it is now that system of record.
Gotcha. In that context, yes. And so the integration that currently resides there is that behavior also resides in Google Analytics and in BigQuery, but that's one of those things that are critical enough to where that attribute of the user also resides in Telium. Mm-hmm. If you want to know of like who starts a process or who to drop, but then also engages elsewhere in the navigation to go look at new courses or also go at a class block, all that event level data does reside in BigQuery, but that pure just basic fact of initiated drop, but did not complete and did not engage anywhere else in PeopleSoft, that single attribute does reside in Telium, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. That's incredibly valuable. Like there's, as you are showing in these use cases, other people are interested in that fact and want to take advantage of it through outreach or some other means.
Yeah, in this, just like the application, PeopleSoft does not delineate between online, or maybe like technically, but the user interface is the same for online or any campus. So this attribute right here, Telium has for all people in PeopleSoft. Now we being Ed Plus, we only act upon it if the individual is an official ASU Online student with an assigned success coach. So in Ed Plus, we have a success coach. Once you're a student, you get assigned a resource. While you are enrolling, you get an enrollment coach to help you to enrollment. So what we currently do with this is when this scenario arises, right now we have a secure, worked with UTO ISO to have a secure webhook, and to Slack, where there's a Slack channel, where we have the student's information, the assigned success coach, and then if there's still a assigned enrollment coach, there are two individuals that are notified that can reach out to the student, or at least coordinate before reaching out to the student to help them understand ASU resources. Next use case to talk about is the propensity modeling going right now from our group inside of the Google AI platform. So the amount of investment, both in human capital and financial, that ASU has in Pearson is enormous. So to make sure that we are able to optimize and get the most out of that relationship and investment is critical. So one of those things is, for example, of all the leads that submit inquiries to ASU Online, only 3% end up enrolling. Now we have models that look at behavior of the individual from that client-side data we talked about, and then predict based upon their behavior if they're going to end up enrolling. And how we define a quality lead score, anyone who is of that lead score or above, we're able to predict with between 70 to 80% accuracy, depending on channel. So again, think of the investment we make and have the confidence of a conversion rate going from a 3%, then upwards of 50 to 70% is enormous. So we want to get this data back out to our end platforms. The platform that does the modeling and the data that it's from is Google Analytics. So then it's running the Google warehouse of Google BigQuery, and then it's Google AI doing the modeling. But there's more to life than just Google. There's Telium, like Pearson works with literally, I think, almost a dozen different platforms. So how can we then get the lead score of that individual and bring that as an attribute, but then assign it to the different platforms as the other platforms identify the individual? So in addition to the Google identifiers and ASU identifiers, we're also collecting the identifiers of the ad platforms that bring someone to the website. So then when Telium gets data back from the Google Cloud Platform of the lead score, saying this is a quality lead, then we can say, okay, I know you sent it over to me with Google ID, but it's also mapping to the Trade Desk ID. And now I will use the Trade Desk ID to send it over to their platform so they can optimize and find people more like this individual. So we're doing that with three models, helping Pearson, Lavage, another agency of record, and Neo, another agency that I was working with, to make sure that all three of our partners are optimizing towards consistent events. So here's a quick snapshot of the customer data platform right now here at ASU. So this doesn't encompass everything, but this is just a high-level overview to where we have the enterprise sales cloud, so CRM. Then we get the contact ID and email address, and plus sales cloud. Then the contact ID, employee ID, alternative email address, the primary email address, ASU Canvas client. So the server-side equivalent is like server caliper data. So, Canvas caliper data, Canvas live data. But then we also have Google Tag Manager and Telium listening from the client. So we make sure we really focus there. So we get the ASU Canvas user ID, email address, Telium ID. General web analytics that we can go to and from between the Google stack and Telium stack. CPE Canvas server side. So again, streaming that data into their CPE Canvas. So between the two different Canvas LMS environments. Marketing Cloud, Ad Plus Marketing Cloud, again, have those IDs there. The admissions portal, RFI forms, all this data goes into a single place where we can configure those attributes. To where here it is in a different context. To where, say, like you had us you're an email communicator and you want to then be able to act upon data that is coming from an app portal. Let's see that. So Salesforce Marketing Cloud, all we have is an enterprise contact ID. So then in order to then get to app portal data, how the heck do you go from here to here when you have no consistent identifier? The Marketing Cloud then looks like there's similarities between enterprise Salesforce and BigQuery right there. Great. Then the app portal then has an email address, but with Google Analytics, we don't store an email address. So then but the app portal does have a Google Client ID, which does have it here. So back to my comment of Telium is not meant to be nor tried to be an enterprise data warehouse. But for those that do work in those environments, if you use a tool called Alteryx, if I'm pronouncing it right, my own view is that's a Swiss Army knife. It's an awesome tool. To where you can try to join different data and schedule and automate things. But still, you have to do that manual configuration, manual setup, and manual maintenance. To where it doesn't matter inside of Telium, you don't have to do that. You just simply have to declare from this data source, this is the individual's user ID. And then also because from the app portal, we've declared this as a user ID. So in the very moment that we get a hit from someone from this data source that this person has an interest in, that profile is enriched in real time and it can be segmented and put into an audience to be triggered and sent down to your own end system automatically and in real time. Or if not, we don't integrate Telium into the N+ CRM directly. because Salesforce can really slow down if you have too much data going into it. So rightfully so, they're really cautious and want to make sure that we don't overwhelm it. So we then send our data into AWS middleware to do more of a batch process. So we're not bogging down that system. But suffice to say, it's dynamic enough to where we could serve, like if you wanted to create a contact object, or if you wanted to automatically create a case inside of Salesforce, it can do that. But if you have your own middleware process to kind of slow down incoming data, we can send it there too.
So Jonathan, back to the system of record point, which is applies to this chart nicely. So if I'm at WP Carey and I want to know, hey, who are all of my Carey students who in the last week went to drop a course but didn't sign up for another one? Is there such a thing as querying Telium, or does Telium have to send a list to WP Carey? Like, what does the actual request information flow look like?
Yeah. So as far as querying the data, I'm sorry, I have a cold and I would have been in office, but it's a pretty good cold, so I'm not going to office. So inside of Telium, the main bread and butter is Onion Stream. That is the incredibly unique, awesome thing. But they also have a product called Data Access. So Telium is simply built, it's a SaaS product built off of AWS, a highly scalable and great cloud platform. All the data that resides in here gets copied and maintained inside of their product called Data Access, but which then is just a white label of a multi-tenant yet secure instance of Redshift and S3, to where we can then query directly these S3 tables or this S3 tables or S3 tables, Redshift tables. Now, we can pay to have a private cloud. Those that use HIPAA might negate that, but that would be astronomically and exponentially more expensive. So we don't have our own private cloud instance of Telium. We're just like Salesforce. We're just part of, like, they just maintain the backend for us. So because it's a multi-tenant environment, I'm sure Redshift is incredibly quick, but we're having difficulty using like Postgres or SQL workbenches to get data out of there. It's not very performant. So we are streaming that data into dedicated, and then like we work in GCP, to then have that go into GCP, so where then we can share with others that need the data. So
if I was that WP Carey person that said, I want to know every one of my students in the last week who has dropped a course but not signed up for another one, they could feasibly work with you to query BigQuery to find that out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you have a schema of what's in there and like a ERD of the data, so someone can look at it and say, oh, I need to join this to this, like, or is it pretty complex?
The data that sits in Redshift and then also then like mirrored in BigQuery is very simple. Like, it's just a table schema, and then we could provide like a data dictionary of what those fields mean. Now, how the data gets into that simplified table is more in S3 and cloud storage, and that would be a little bit more difficult.
Sure. Is it just a really wide table?
Yeah.
Does it just have like tons of columns, like keyed on a student, keyed on a person, and did the person do A, do B, do like have 157 different things they might have done?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And so to date, a lot of work has been on integrating data sources, getting it in more broad use case environments, to where we haven't done as much as good of documentation. And like, I'll be the first to, I'm horrible at documentation, but we have 2 new resources, or one, and then one soon to be filled, dedicated on this, to our documentation and providing those type of data dictionaries and integrations that other units need is becoming our main priority, to make this more understandable and then more quickly adopted. Yeah. I think we're at close to time. And Mike, thanks for those questions and commentary. Are there any other questions that we have, or if we don't have time, I don't know.
It's a lot of rich information. You guys have done a phenomenal job with that. Thanks for sharing.
No problem. So I guess there may be ways to stay in touch with this is two main things. One, or if you have questions, reach out to me. But if you're part of the web standards community, the concept of data layer standardization, that's critical to being able to leverage a tool like this more broadly. If you're then also somehow aligning, I don't quite know how this works or how it's organized, but through the enterprise technology work stream, spearheaded by Warwick Pond, to try to find enterprise technical solutions to user experiences. If that sounds familiar to you, just keep listening for on that work stream, where the concepts of a CDP are becoming more broadly discussed.
All right, well, thanks so much for sharing, Jonathan. It's cool to see the complex ecosystem like this come together.